right, welcome back. Now, the ambivalence of Kenya's policy and lawmakers on biotechnology is indicative of diverse pressures bearing on them to take some stands with regard to GMOs or biotech crops. According to Professor Crispus Kiamba, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Kenya will eventually have to adopt genetically modified food technologies to feed its growing population, no matter how long it takes. Dr. Clive James is the founder and the board chair of International Service for Acquisition of Agri-Biotech Applications, ISA, and he's here to tell us more on the benefits of GMOs or biotech crops, as you call it. Good to have you.
Thank you very much.
Right. What time did you wake up today to come for this show? I know it must have been pretty
About
early.
5:30.
5:30.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to be up in the morning.
Right. Now, tell us more about ISA. What is the mandate of ISA?
Well, ISA is a not-for-profit organization co-sponsored by both the private and the public sector. The goal is to alleviate poverty. We today have 1 billion people suffering from poverty, malnutrition, morally unacceptable. So we believe that the best way to tackle this is to share knowledge. This is a science that is not well understood, and therefore you had many negative comments in the press. We believe that sharing knowledge is the noble way to do it. If I tell you to do something, you might do it. If you consult the database and you decide that you want to do it, then you will do everything to protect that decision. Now, the challenge of feeding the world tomorrow is absolutely immense. Let me share one statement with you that captures the enormity of the challenge. In the next 50 years, the global community, the global population will consume twice as much food as the global population has consumed since the beginning of agriculture 10,000 years ago. That is almost inconceivable. You cannot get that scale into your mind. But the fact that it's real and that 99% of the population don't even know about the challenge is very important. It is evident that conventional technology alone will not allow you to double food production by 2050, when the global population will be 9 billion people, when the population of Kenya has increased from its current 41 million to over 80 million.
Wow.
So this is the importance of the new technology. What we are proposing and what people in science are proposing is that you take the best of conventional technology along with the best of biotechnology and bring those together. It is the synergism between these two elements that offers the best opportunity of feeding the world of tomorrow. Now, I want to point out very clearly that ISA is a pro-choice organization. What does that mean? It means that we respect the rights of people who only want to use conventional technology. Those who want to use only organic agriculture and can afford the much more expensive products. The poor cannot. But we also believe that, in fact, those who want to avail themselves of the significant and substantial benefits that biotech crops offer should have thus choice. We're talking about coexistence. Is it practical? Yes. Spain has been doing it for the last 15 years, growing conventional, organic, and biotech together.
And biotech remains to be the sharpest point of contention in this country, because I don't know, we maybe have a misconception of what it all entails, the biotech crops, because we believe maybe there's some side effect to all this.
Yeah.
Kindly walk us through, what is the GM or the biotech technology? What does it really entail?
Biotechnology is different from conventional technology because you take a gene from a different crop or a different organism and insert it into a crop like maize or wheat. Normally, in a conventional breeding program, you only deal with genes in that crop.
Yes.
That's the only difference. You can compare conventional technology as a very approximate science compared with a very precise science of biotechnology, where you identify a certain gene that will give you big and substantial benefits. Now, if we look at the use of biotech crops, from the beginning. The genesis of commercialization was in 1996 when we planted 1.7 million hectares globally. The acreage today, or the hectareage today, is 160 million hectares. Now, how big is that? That's 2.5 times the total land area of Kenya.
True.
Huge, yeah? The 94-fold increase that you had between 1996, when you had 1.7 million hectares, and 160 million hectares today, is a 94-fold increase. That makes this technology the fastest crop technology in terms of adoption in history. Why? Because millions of farmers in 29 countries over 16 years have used this technology and have benefited from it significantly. So that figure is very important. When this technology was first introduced in 1996, it was scientists who said, let's be sure that we test this technology rigorously in case there are non-intended effects. What we have now is 16 years of solid scientific data in support of the technology. It is safe from a food point of view. Indeed, in the case of maize, which Kenya is looking at, BT maize, it is safer because there's low levels of mycotoxin. Let's remember that last year in Germany, organic agriculture, this was bean sprouts with the bacterium E. coli, which is poisonous, killed 48 people, over 1,000 people in hospital. That's organic agriculture. What does it tell you? That there is no zero risk in biology. But in terms of safety, this technology is as safe as conventional technology, or sometimes safer. This technology has been looked at very, very carefully from a science viewpoint. And the benefits are huge. If we look at the increase in production from 1996 to 2010, the first year, 15 years of commercialization, the increase in benefit is $78 billion, B for Bob. Now, the GDP of Kenya, as I understand, is 30 billion. So here's a technology that is allowing the world population to gain in a very significant way. A big impact on the environment, decreases pesticides, makes a contribution to climate change, because this technology goes hand in glove with conservation technology. When you don't have to plow, which this technology allows you to do, then you conserve the CO2. So you can decrease CO2 emissions in 2010 alone to the tune of 19 billion kilograms. Let me express it to you in a way that you can understand. That's equivalent to taking 9 million cars off the road for 1 year. I gather in Nairobi that you got about 500,000. So these are huge. And more important than anything else, I had the pleasure of working with Norman Borlaug, the Nobel Peace Prize winner for 1970, who was awarded the prize because he saved 1,000 million people from hunger. Huge task. He believed that this technology, the most important contribution is the contribution to the alleviation of poverty.
Now, you co-founded ISA with the person who's just passed on, the one you mentioned. I can't remember his name.
Yes, I founded the organization almost 20 years ago. I worked in the International Maize and Wheat Center in Mexico, and Dr. Borlaug was the head of the wheat program. He was the one that was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the only one in agriculture. And this is for technology. He died a couple of years ago.
This particular technology, the biotechnology?
He was the great, no, that was a conventional technology.
Conventional technology.
But he knew that conventional technology alone will not allow you to feed the world. You're just buying time. He was the greatest advocate of this new technology. He said, you must use the new technology, otherwise we're going to lose the race. The latest figures are that the world population will climb to 10 billion people by the end of the century. So the big question is, how do you feed them? And when we look at the contribution that this has made to alleviation of poverty, in 2011 alone, we had 15 million resource-poor small farmers benefit from this technology and their families. 50 million benefited.
Right.
How come? It increased food production, decreased the application of pesticides, and provided a better quality of life.
Right. But I think also the technology has received some frosty reception in other parts of the world, like maybe in America, yeah, where they, first of all, they really had a bugbears and fears about all this technology that was coming and the GMOs, and now they're exporting actually the GMOs to South Africa with them, Monsanto doing this, and it's been also a debate that is still raging.
Yeah.
How is the reception out there?
Unfortunately, you know, that is not fact, it's fiction. If we look at the adoption of biotech crops in the US, you find that over 90% of all their major crops are already benefiting from this technology. South Africa has used this technology very beneficially for the last almost 15 years. And one of the products that they use is BT maize, white maize, used for food. You have two types of maize. One is a yellow maize, normally used for feed, for cattle, and the other one is white maize, used for mealie mealie in Africa. Now, about 65% of the white maize in Africa is used for food. There's been no problems in terms of acceptance. Indeed, if we look at the use of this technology, between 2 and 3 trillion meals have been prepared with GM crops. And the amazing thing is that not even a suggestion that there's an issue of safety. So it's clear. And this is what I was telling you at the beginning. This is why we appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. It's based on science. The technology is sound, it is safe, it can contribute to the environment and the alleviation of poverty. I'm very glad to see your president endorse this technology. And the permanent secretary, Crispus, in terms of advanced education, technology and science, accept, define the issue and indicate the full support of the Kenyan government. We expect Kenya to commercialize its first crop in 2014. That's BT cotton. It's a technology that has been tested in about 15 countries that have delivered benefits of around $25 billion to people around the globe. If we look at the 29 countries today that are using this technology, that are planting this technology, it is equivalent to more than 50% of the world population. So already you have more than half the world benefiting from this technology.
You know, pundits were actually worried that why the Westerners actually trying to front this technology and using Africa as a guinea pig, because they don't want to use it in their own countries, but they want to come and test the veracity of this or the efficacy of a GMO.
That is not the case, and I appreciate the opportunity again to react to that comment. If we look at the developing countries today, there are 29 countries in total that plant this technology. 19 of them out of the 29 are developing countries. The large countries, China, India, Brazil, Argentina, South Africa. So all the lead developing countries are already using this technology and getting significant benefits from it. The challenge for a smaller country like Kenya is how do you put together the critical mass that you need to actually develop this technology. Now, you're fortunate that there are philanthropists around, people like Bill Gates. The technology, one of the very important technologies that Kenya will be looking at is a drought-tolerant maize. If you look back in the annals of history, drought has always been the killer in Africa. Last year, in the countries of the Horn of Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, Djibouti, Ethiopia, 12 million people at risk from famine. Why? Drought. Now, there's a new technology that hopefully will be planted in the States for the first time in 2013 that is tolerant to drought. This technology has been donated by 2 private companies, Monsanto from the US and BSF from Germany, to Africa for free. The program is funded by Bill Gates and Melinda Gates and the Howard Buffett Foundation. It is worked through the International Maize and Wheat Center in Mexico, where I worked for 10 years in the 1980s, with Kenya, institutions like CARI, the Kenyan Agricultural Research Institute. That is expected to be available around 2017. My assessment is that this is one of the most important attributes that Kenya can gain from, because drought is the #1 constraint to production. Agriculture uses 70% of all the fresh water in the world, not sustainable for the future. So Kenya is in the very happy position that you have scientists of international caliber in institutions like CARI, that you have policymakers that provide the political will for the technology, and that Kenyans in the future will be able to be less reliant on others for food, feed and fiber. You know, the other contribution here that is very important to note is that if in fact you can increase food production, you can also do something else that is very important. You can contribute to a more peaceful world. Norman Borlaug used to impress on me. He said, you cannot build peace on empty stomachs. A truism, a truth. The right to food is imperative. And I believe the way forward is to work together. The North and the South, the developed and the developing countries, the public and the private sector, using conventional and biotechnology in coexistence to provide the sustenance that we need to feed the hungry people. In Kenya today, apparently you have 12 million poor people. How do we make quite sure that those will be fed in the future, when at the same time the population of Kenya will increase from 40 million to 80 million people?
Right. The question is then, the drought-resistant maize that now you're planning to plant in America.
Yes.
Is it part also of the water-efficient maize for Africa project that you're intending to roll out?
Exactly.
In Africa?
Exactly. It's the WEMA project.
It's the WEMA project.
And that germplasm is unique in that it addresses the #1 constraint to production worldwide.
Right.
All regions, all crops.
So Africa, it is not tested yet?
It is tested, but the final tests are being done this year to check on the increases in production that you'll get when a drought stress is in place.
All right. What other projects now are you rolling out for Africa in terms of, trying to increase the food security?
Well, there's cassava.
This cassava.
Very important. There's sorghum. There's sweet potato. Sweet potato is affected by virus diseases right here in Kenya in a very significant way. And we have technology in biotech that will allow you to counter that. If we look at the losses due to pests, weeds and diseases, it's equivalent to something like 40% of the total yield. So we're losing 40%. So here's a technology that will allow you to realize that gain here, increase the food production and make a contribution to the alleviation of poverty. I think what's happened over the last 15 years is that the question has been asked by scientists, is there a risk associated with this technology? This is the most rigorously tested crop technology that we know of. Now the question that hasn't been asked and should be asked is the question on the flip side of that coin. What is the risk to Kenya if you don't use the technology? And if you don't use the technology, you will be disadvantaged compared with others. You will not be able to feed yourself. You're saying no to all the bountiful benefits that science offers. And in the end, you will pay the highest price for the poorest product, and you'll be dependent on others for food, feed and fiber. Is that where you want to be? I don't think so.
Let's flip the question to you again and ask you, yes, you have the biotechnology or the biotech crops, but do we have the same nutritive value that we can have in the crops as compared to the organic crops? Are we losing any nutritive value?
Not at all. In fact, the opposite. If we look at organic agriculture, at best it can feed 4 billion people. So what do we do with the other 5 billion? What you're seeing today is that not only can you increase production due to improved control of weeds, but you can increase nutrition. Let me give you one example on rice. Rice is short in vitamin A, yeah? So you get vitamin A deficiency diseases. How important is that? Well, it kills 6,000 people a day, mainly children and women. Another 500,000 innocent children become permanently blind. In 2013, 2014, we will see golden rice with an enhanced level of vitamin A, which provides a remedy for this disease. A friend of mine, Patrick Moore, the former co-founder of Greenpeace, made a statement the other day that was very important. He said, Greenpeace's opposition to this technology that kills 6,000 people a day is a crime against humanity. It has been delayed for 10 years because of overregulation. So what you have in this technology is a way of manipulating genes so that in fact you can increase yield, you can increase nutrition, because every trait is controlled by a gene. So therefore you can improve the crop in all aspects with the technology. Let me be very clear that we are not advocating this as a panacea. It is not the golden bullet, but it is an important new tool in the toolbox that we have in order to fight hunger tomorrow.
Right.
I believe for Kenya it is absolutely important, but I respect the view that it is Kenyans that must make the decision about this technology. We will provide you with a knowledge base.
Right. Dr. Clive, there are also concerns that the inserted genes may be transferred to the wild population or the wild relatives of GMOs. How are you planning to combat this, or what is the remedial measure in place?
When you look at biotechnology in relation to gene flow, gene flow is something that happens naturally. And when you develop certain products in terms of biotech, you study those gene flows. So in a country like Mexico, for example, which is the home of maize, that's where maize developed, special precautions are made so that in fact you protect the centers of diversity in terms of gene flow. So all of that is taken care of, and as I told you at the beginning, coexistence policies have been developed. They're used in Europe, in a country like Spain, to have the 3 crops grown together.
Right. Also there are fears that concerns about religion and stuff like that when you're doing the genetic engineering and you're drawing maybe genes from the animals or the animals. It seems to some quarters of this population who maybe are they really revere certain animals like cows. That can be a violation of their rights, don't you think?
Ethical considerations we fully respect, 100%. As I told you at the beginning, we are a pro-choice organization.
Yes.
We believe that the different segments of society that have preferences, whether it be to religion or any other, should be catered for. Happily, the technology can do that. Now, in contrast to that, if you take an organization like Greenpeace, Greenpeace says, our way or no way. And by the way, if you do plant it, we will break public law and we will destroy the crops. That's not the way forward. Science has always respected a diversity of opinion. That's the way science has grown, and this is the way that this is being handled.
Why do we still have a low adoption of agricultural biotechnology, especially the transgenic crops? Maybe you can break it down for us and tell us what is transgenic crops. Is it still like the biotech crops?
What we have today is 4 major crops.
4 major crops?
Yeah. Soybean and maize. These are 2 feed crops. Maize is a food crop in Africa. You have cotton, very important in terms of fabric, and you've got canola, an oil base. But already the list is expanding to sugar beet, to papaya, and it's just a matter of time. So what you see today in terms of application is just, a very small area of land which can increase significantly in the future. What you've seen today is just a shadow of what the technology offers. And this is very important for policymakers. If you say no to this technology, be very sure to know what you were saying no to.
Wow, that really sounds like, should I say, the prophet who's really sounding an alarm here.
Well, we don't sell this as a panacea, yeah? But the figures that I've shared with you are based on scientific assessments of what this technology can do. We've seen just the tip of the iceberg to date. This technology has the potential to contribute, not to solve, yeah? It's not a golden bullet, yeah? In a very, very substantial way. And if we do not use it, then we run the risk that we will not be able to feed the world of tomorrow.
Right. You know, Kenya now has adopted the National Biosafety Act.
Yes.
Which is currently in place, and of course it's been lauded by the scientists here in the country, and we're wondering then what is the next step now that we have this act in place?
The next step is to finalize the field trials that will be larger and more numerous in different areas. That information then will be used by government to make a recommendation, to make an approval for the commercialization. And that is expected to happen for BT cotton, a fiber crop, in 2014. You're also looking at BT maize. This is a maize that is resistant to a very important pest, and of course the drought-tolerant maize. Those are three products that in fact will be looked at carefully in Kenya over the period from now until 2017.
Yes, if you do your comparative assessment, of course you've been rolling out this project elsewhere in Africa. How do we compare so far?
I believe that Kenya has been one of the leaders in looking at exploring the potential for GM crops. There are three countries already using the technology on the continent of Africa. You have South Africa, which has used it extensively.
Are they using the BT cotton also?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
All right.
Burkina Faso, using BT cotton, substantial benefits. You're looking at about a 20% increase in yield, a decrease in the number of applications of insecticides that you put on from 6 to 4, good for the environment, safer for small farmers because you're exposing them to less pesticide exposure. And of course, you are increasing profitability. You are increasing the income of poor farmers. In the next round, there are three countries. Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria possibly, and Ghana. And we expect that by 2015, which is the Millennium Development Goal year, when we have said as a global community that we will cut poverty in half, that we will have at least 6 countries in Africa using the technology. The road is just opening up. Yeah. You have the scientists in Kenya to develop their own product. If we look at the new opportunities of working with other countries in the south, the new investments for this technology are not coming from the international private sector. They are coming from public sector institutions in countries of the south. The academy in China, the same in India, Brazil. There's an organization that's equivalent to CARI called Embrapa that has $1 billion budget per year, yeah, that has the capability to develop its own technology, that has already established links in Africa, in countries like Ghana, in countries like Mozambique, Angola. Brazil has technology that could help Kenya. The opportunity now is to partner up with new friends from the south in order to work together towards the technology. I believe that the word together is the key. If we put a program together that involves countries like Kenya, yeah, countries in the north that have developed the technology, the public and the private sector, we all work together. That concept can be captured in a simple proverb that says, united, we will stand, divided, we will fall. Yeah? And when we look at the need in Kenya to increase the critical mass that we have for this technology, it may be not at the level that you want. So how do you create that critical mass? The obvious thing to do is to collaborate with others outside the boundaries, with the Brazils, with the Chinas of this world, in order that you can work together. And if you do that, then I think you can also make a contribution to peace. You can work together towards providing food. Yeah.
Right.
So we believe that this technology is key. If we don't have enough food, yeah, there's a proverb that says, a drowning man will clutch a straw. A starving man will do anything, anything to survive. It's a most important instinct. And I'm sure that Kenya, with the leadership that you've got from the President, from the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology, will make the right decisions and serve the Kenyan people. We are prepared. We have an office here headed by Dr. Margaret Karembu that provides knowledge. We will share that knowledge, but respect the view that you are the people that must make the decision based on that knowledge.
Is that the Open Forum office? Can you tell us more about the Open Forum?
We had a very good discussion on the technology yesterday in the Open Forum, an acknowledgement that this technology is extremely important, an endorsement of the view that the question that a country like Kenya should ask now, not only what is the risk associated with this technology, for which we have a sound database, but ask the question, what is the risk to Kenya if you do not use this technology? And I think the response to that and the answer to that is very evident.
Now, the attendant question that really comes with the biotech crops also is the question of the pesticides and the fertilizer. Do we get to really have to use a lot of this with this technology, or it is something that we can forget about?
It is the reverse, again. And this shows you how rumors have developed into almost semi-facts in terms of the international dialogue. The exact figures are that in the 15-year period, 1996 to 2010, this technology saved 443 million kilograms of pesticides. That's equivalent to almost 10% of all the pesticides that we use globally. As far as fertilizer is concerned, there's a technology in the pipeline that will decrease the need for high levels of nitrogen. That will be very important because when you use less nitrogen, the cost of food will be lower. It'll be more affordable for poor people. And also, you will not be able to, or you will not pollute the waterways with high concentrations of nitrogen. So the pipeline that we have in terms of this technology is pretty full. We have another product called omega-3 oil. This is called fish oil that is very healthy for you, decreases cardiac problems. That is an oil that you normally find in fish. Now soybean has been engineered to enhance the levels of fish oil. So that will be available to more people at lower cost. So what we're talking about here is increases that are related to agronomic constraints like weeds, pests and diseases, and that has been the first generation of products, but now we're moving into the nutritional phase, and of course you'll be able to combine those. You know, when a farmer grows a crop, he has a need for a crop that will do well in drought conditions, resistant to insects, resistant to disease, be able to manage weed well, high nutrition, all of these, multiple needs. And the way that you respond to that is through multiple genes. Genes control each of those functions. And we already have a crop in maize with 8 genes in the one variety, in the one hybrid, that will allow you to counter and address the multiple needs. So as we go forward, the strength and breadth of this technology will increase markedly. We believe that it's very important for countries like Kenya to have their own people involved, so they can be full partners. Ownership of the technology is very important here. And I believe that the fact that the new partners who are making very big investments in this technology are the Brazils of this world, who also know, as number 2 country in the world in terms of biotech crops, they increased their acreage. They increased it by 5 million hectares last year. That responsibilities comes with success. And they've already looking at the opportunity of establishing broader partnerships with countries in Africa.
Right. Now, let's talk about the animal rights. I was watching a very interesting documentary, and in which time I saw the animals, they're being injected with all these genetically modified organisms, and they grow and they can barely even carry their own weight. The chickens or the hens that I saw there, they could not even move because they were just too heavy.
Yeah.
And these are the things that are being churned out in the markets and we are eating today. How safe are we? And what about the animal rights in terms of even them being in good nature as God made them?
Yeah. The area that we are working on is solely on plants, on crops. The major developments at this time in terms of biotechnology are on the crop side. I have no doubt that there will be developments on the animal side in the future, just starting, but that's not part of our remit. It goes beyond. Let me just say that if you look at...
but you being a food expert, I think you can lend your perspective on this, isn't it?
Yes, of course. And the experience that has been gained with crop technology will be very important when you apply it to animals. If we look at the source of food for Homo sapiens on a global basis, we produce 10 billion tons of food every year, annually, at a cost of something like $3 trillion. So crops are the major source of food. Now, they're used in two ways. You can consume them directly, as you consume white maize in Kenya for food, or you can use them as feed to feed animals. The feed industry has already benefited significantly from animals that have been fed biotech crops. They would be mainly maize, yellow maize, and soybean. And that has been very, very carefully controlled. If we look at the import of these crops, excuse me, it is already substantial. The EU, for example, import about 30 million tons of biotech crops. Yeah, it is the major source of food. If you don't rely on biotech crops, then the price of meat is is going to increase very significantly. And if we look today at Asia in particular, where wealth has been created, what we see is an increased consumption of meat in countries like China. Yeah. Increased demand for meat means increased demand for the feed crops of corn and soybean. And a country like China is looking at this very carefully because their policy is to be least dependent on others for food, feed and fiber. Well understandable strategy. So what you're seeing today is that as the Chinese eat significantly more meat, they have to import more corn, more maize, more soybean. They're using biotechnology in a significant way to increase domestic production so that they are least dependent on others. I think Kenya is in a similar situation where you'll have to look at both the biotech crops for food directly and for feed.
Right. Dr. Clive James, I really appreciate you coming this morning to give us that insight. Really do appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. It was an exercise in sharing knowledge.
Thank you. And I think you really had a very wonderful quote there of a drowning man. I think you'll come in handy in our closing segment here.
Indeed.
I'll look up to you to do that. Right. I've been talking to Dr. Clive James. He's a founder and board chair of the International Service for the Acquisition of Biotech Applications. And he's been telling us more about the biotech crops or the GMOs as we know it in this country. The safety of the GMOs, I think and I hope is allayed your fears as far as the GMOs is concerned. And I leave you with his famous quotes that he told us today. What was that quote again?
A drowning man will clutch a straw. A starving man will do anything to survive. It has a most important instinct. It's all about survival.
It's all about survival. Well, think about that. Wonderful. Right. See you on Lifestyle. We'll be having some wonderful raving beauties here in the studio to tell us more about what Sup Sisters is all about. Divas, don't go away.
more you deposit into your KCB account, the greater your chances of winning a Toyota Saloon car or Nissan pickup every 2 weeks for 3 months.
Just set the timer and it releases bursts of fresh fragrance automatically and brightens your home. Something in the Airwick.
Get the hit from Ukimwona by Pilipili featuring Lady S on your phone now. SMS GER to 5525. It's quick, easy, and works on all networks. Just SMS GER to 5525 now.
In John's life, action runs non-stop. Now, I can't be with him all the time, 24 hours a day. That's why I've given him Dettol Soap's non-stop protection, which gives him 24 hours protection from germs. In the morning, when he faces germs, afternoon, when he's up to mischief, playing in the evening. Non-stop protection keeps going on and on.
Indeed, Dettol Soap's non-stop protection formula has the power of Dettol, which gives non-stop protection from germs for 24 hours.
All day and all night.
Mother's weapon for non-stop protection. Dettol. Be 100% sure.
Kwa majina yangu naitwa Phyllis Mutesa, mwimbaji wa nyimbo za Injili, na mimi ni msichana, nimeokoka na mpenda Yesu. Nilianza kuimba nikiwa mtoto mdogo, nikiwa nyumbani. Nikaanza kuimba kwa Sunday school. Kutoka Sunday school nikaanza kuimba kwaya ya nyumbani. Alafu nilipokuja Nairobi nikaanza kuimba tena kwaya. Na sasa nikaanza kutoa nyimbo zangu. Nimetoa album hii, ni latest album inaitwa Njichopefu.